The royal physicians had been in that chamber for 6 hours. 6 hours of the best medical minds in 7-pack territories gathered around the Alpha King's heir, applying every certified treatment in every approved protocol, and the cub was still dying. Alpha King, Kalen, Ashvale, stood at the chamber door with his hands at his sides, and his face doing the thing it did when he was holding something enormous, very still, and he watched his son's chest rise and fall too. Shallow, too slow, and understood that he was running out of time and out of options simultaneously. That was when someone spoke from the back of the corridor. Quiet, almost apologetic. "My lord, there's a healer in the east courtyard. She came with the supply train. She's been asking to be admitted for 2 hours. We have 12 physicians. She's not a physician, my lord. She's an Omega healer, unranked, no formal credentials." Kalen turned. The guard who had spoken looked like a man who understood he might be about to have a very bad day. "Lord Brennan already turned her away," the guard said. "Twice. She keeps coming back." Kalen looked at the chamber door, at his son's breathing, at the 12 certified physicians who had not, in 6 hours, made it better. "Bring her," he said. When Senna was finally brought through the palace corridor and into the royal healing chamber, the court had the specific quality of silence that happens when a room full of important people have collectively decided to witness something they expect to fail. Lord Brennan stood at the back with his arms crossed, and the expression of a man who had already composed his, "I told you so." 12 physicians watched her with the professional skepticism of people whose credentials were being implicitly questioned by her presence. The Alpha King stood at the foot of the bed and looked at her with the gray eyes that she would learn, later, were the same eyes his son had, and she understood, in that look, that he was not interested in her credentials. He was interested in whether she could help. She crossed to the bed. She was 24 years old. No pack bond, no formal appointment, a worn healer's satchel over one shoulder, and ink-stained hands, and the specific kind of calm that came not from the absence of fear, but from deciding that fear was not the most important thing in the room. She put her hands on the cub. The room held its breath. And then slowly, unmistakably, something began to change. Act 1, who they said she was. Let me tell you who Senna was before the chamber. She was the daughter of a border healer who had died when Senna was 14, leaving her a satchel of knowledge, a set of well-used instruments, and the specific inheritance of a woman who had spent her life treating the people that the formal medical system never reached. She had been practicing on her own since she was 16. Not practicing in the formal sense, she had no academy certification, no guild registration, no pack appointment. The formal medical structure of the Ironmark territory required all 3 to treat patients officially. She had none of them. What she had was 10 years of watching her mother work, 4 years of working herself, and the particular diagnostic instinct that came from spending most of those years in border settlements where there were no certified physicians and people got sick anyway. She had applied for formal certification twice. The first time, the examination board had reviewed her case history documentation, which was extensive and carefully maintained, and declined on the grounds that she lacked the prerequisite academy training, which cost a sum that would have taken her 4 years to save. The second time, she had saved the sum and applied to the academy. She had been placed on a waiting list and told that Omega applicants without pack sponsorship were admitted when space allowed. The space had not allowed in the 1.5 years since. She had continued working. She had been in the area of Ironmark's capital because the supply train she'd been traveling with stopped here, and because there was a fever moving through the eastern settlements that she'd been treating for 2 months, and that she needed certain compounds for that the capital's supply stores carried. She had heard about the Alpha King's heir at the first settlement gate. The royal cub, the gate guard had said, to no one in particular, to everyone. 6 days sick. The royal physicians can't break it. Senna had listened to the description. She had been listening to descriptions of this illness for 2 months. She knew what it was, and she knew what it needed, and she knew that the certified physicians were almost certainly treating it as something it wasn't. She had gone to the palace. She had been turned away. She had gone back. She had been turned away again, more firmly, by Lord Brennan himself. who had looked at her with the assessment of a man confirming something he'd already decided, and said, "The royal heir does not need an unranked boarder Omega. He has 12 of the best physicians in the territory. He has 12 physicians treating the wrong illness," she had said. "You are dismissed," Brennan had said. She had gone back to the courtyard. She had sat on the supply cart and thought about the cub's symptoms as she'd heard them described, and the pattern she'd seen for 2 months, and the specific failure mode of treating this illness as the fever it appeared to be, rather than the deeper cause underneath. She had gone back a third time. The guard who had taken her report upward instead of turning her away was called Aldrich, and she would later learn that he had done it not because he believed she could help, but because he was a man who, when out of options, preferred to do the thing he hadn't done yet, rather than repeat the things that hadn't worked. He had taken her report to the Alpha King, and now she was in the chamber. Act 2. What her hands found. The cub's name was Kale. He was 6 years old, dark-haired, even ill, even at the ragged edge of what his small body could sustain. He had the gray eyes of the Ashvale bloodline slightly open now, barely tracking, the specific, unfocused quality of someone who had been fighting for a very long time and was running low on fight. Senna put her hands on his chest, his throat, the glands at the base of his jaw. She did this without ceremony, without asking permission, because she had been doing diagnostic assessments for 4 years and ceremony slowed them down. The room was very quiet. She could feel the weight of 12 physicians' professional skepticism at her back, could feel Lord Brennan's particular quality of watchful disapproval, could feel the Alpha King at the foot of the bed she had positioned herself so he was in her peripheral vision, because she had learned that knowing where the most important person in the room was kept you from being surprised. She pressed carefully along the jaw glands. There, swollen in a specific pattern, not the fever's primary symptom, the fever's secondary one, which meant the physicians had been treating downstream while the source continued. She opened her satchel. "This is swamp throat," she said, quietly, not performing the diagnosis stating it, the way she stated things she knew. Not the summer fever. The presentations are similar in the first 2 days. They diverge on the third. By day 6, treating it as summer fever actively worsens the swamp throat progression because the standard fever compounds suppress the wrong response. One of the physicians, a senior man, well-credentialed, clearly accustomed to being the most informed person in any medical conversation, said, "Swamp throat is a border settlement illness. It doesn't present in urban pack populations." "It didn't used to," Senna said, opening a compound case. "It's been moving through the eastern settlements for 2 months. The supply trains brought it in. We would have been notified." "Through what mechanism?" she said. "The border settlement healers don't have access to the formal notification system. That requires guild registration. None of us have it. And..." The room was quiet in a different way. She prepared the compound. Her hands were steady in the way that came from doing this work under worse conditions in settlement huts with inadequate light, on roadsides, once in a barn during a storm because the barn was what was available. "What is that compound?" the senior physician said. "Deep root extract, cold-pressed, ironwood bark, powdered, clearwater moss, dried," she measured. "The specific combination addresses the underlying swamp throat pathogen. The doses are weight-adjusted. I need to know when he last ate." "Noon yesterday," a quiet voice said. She looked up. The Alpha King had moved from the foot of the bed to the side of it. He was looking at his son with an expression that she understood was not usually visible, the expression behind the managed composure, the one that existed when the managed composure had been running for 6 days and was getting tired. "He wouldn't eat this morning," Kaelin said. "That's consistent," she said. "The compound works better on an empty stomach. It's a coincidence that helps us." She adjusted the dose. "Can you..." She stopped, decided. "Can you hold him? He needs to be upright for this, and he'll be more willing with you." The senior physician made a sound. The Alpha King of Ironmark moved to the head of the bed and gathered his 6-year-old son into his arms with the careful tenderness of a man who had been frightened for 6 days and was pouring everything he had left into the mound. Next few minutes. Kale stirred slightly at his father's voice, not fully conscious, but responding. "Good," Senna said quietly. "Talk to him. Keep him present." Kalen bent his head to his son's ear and spoke. She didn't hear the words. They were private, meant for the child and not the room, and Kale's breathing shifted fractionally, more aware. More here. She administered the compound. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and waited. Act 3. The court watches. For 40 minutes, nothing appeared to change. The room stayed exactly as it was. 12 physicians, Lord Brennan, the Alpha King, with his son against his chest. The unranked Omega healer on the edge of the bed watching the child's breathing with the focused attention of someone reading a language she'd spent years learning. Brennan spoke at the 20-minute mark. My lord, if this is not producing results. It's not the 20-minute compound, Senna said, without looking up from the child. It works in the lower tract first. You'll see the breathing change before you see the fever break. The fever breaks last. You are quite certain, Brennan said, in the tone of a man who was not asking whether she was certain but communicating that her certainty was inappropriate. I've treated 37 cases of swamp throat in the last 2 months, she said. I've lost one. The one I lost was on day 9, and had been on standard fever protocol for the full 9 days before I reached her. The room absorbed this. 37, the senior physician said slowly. 37, she confirmed. I've kept records if anyone wants to review them. No one responded. At the 35th minute, Kale's breathing changed. It was subtle, the kind of thing you missed if you weren't watching for it. A slight deepening. A fractional increase in the chest expansion. Senna saw it. She did not say anything. She simply reached into her satchel for the second compound. His breathing, one of the junior physicians said suddenly, from the left side of the bed. It's... Yes, she said. It is. She prepared the second compound. This one was more complex. 5 components, sequenced preparation, specific temperature requirements that she'd been managing with the portable brazier she'd asked for when she came in, and which 3 people in the room had clearly thought was unnecessary. What is that? The senior physician asked. His tone had changed. The professional skepticism was still there, but it was doing something it hadn't been doing before it was listening. The second stage treatment, she said. The first compound clears the pathogen's upper resistance. Without that, this one doesn't work. They have to be administered in sequence, approximately 40 minutes apart. How did you develop this protocol? I didn't, she said. My mother did. She treated swamp throat in the eastern settlements for 20 years. I learned from her. And this isn't documented anywhere in the formal. Border settlement healers don't publish to the formal medical registry, she said. That requires guild membership. We don't have it. The knowledge stays local. The room was very quiet. She administered the second compound. Kale was more responsive now, not awake, not himself yet, but present in a way he hadn't been an hour ago. His father was still holding him, and she could see, in the line of Kalen's shoulders, the specific change of someone who has been terrified for 6 days and is very carefully not letting themselves believe it's over yet because the cost of being wrong would be unbearable. She understood that. She had seen it in settlement fathers and mothers for 4 years. He needs to sleep now, she said. Real sleep, not the illness sleep. When he wakes, he'll be hungry. Give him the broth first plain, no spice, then solid food after 2 hours. And the fever? Kalen said. Will break before morning, she said. He'll sweat. That's correct. Don't suppress it. He looked at her. How certain are you? 37 cases, she said. I've kept records. Act 4. What Brennan did. She was in the corridor outside the chamber when Brennan found her. The court had dispersed slightly. The Alpha King was inside with his son, 2 physicians maintaining watch, the others in the adjacent room discussing in the careful tones of people adjusting their professional positions. Brennan was not adjusting his position. Brennan had his position, and it was the same one it had always been. You should understand, he said, standing in front of her with the authority of a man who controlled most of the palace's formal functions and knew it, that what happened in there does not change your status. You are an unranked, unbonded Omega with no formal credentials. What you just did is unauthorized medical practice in the royal chambers. Senna looked at him. I'm aware, she said. The Alpha King is grateful. That's understandable. but gratitude does not override the formal medical licensing requirements that protect this territory's healing standards. Standards that didn't include swamp throat in their protocol references, she said, despite it moving through the eastern settlements for 2 months. A lapse that will be corrected. Good, she said. The correction should include a mechanism for border settlement healers to report to the formal notification system without requiring guild membership first. Otherwise, the information stops at the same gate. Brennan's expression did not change. You are not in a position to recommend policy. No, she said. I know. You'll be accommodated tonight because the Alpha King will insist on it. Tomorrow you will accept whatever recognition he offers, and then you will return to the border settlements where you belong. She looked at him steadily. She had been looked down on for 4 years. She had developed a specific quality of stillness for it, the kind that didn't argue and didn't submit and simply remained present as itself. My lord, she said, is the cub alive? Brennan said nothing. I'm going to finish writing my case notes, she said. Thank you for your time. She went back to the small room off the corridor where she'd left her satchel and sat down and wrote her case notes with the methodical thoroughness of someone who had learned that records were the only protection that reliably worked. She was halfway through when the door opened. Kalen came in without announcement, which she was beginning to understand was how he moved through his own palace, the Alpha King's prerogative of existing wherever he chose without ceremony. He closed the door. She put down her pen and waited. He sat across from her, which was becoming their default configuration. 2 people who preferred function to formality, making do with what was available. He looked like a man who had been holding something enormous very still for 6 days and had just, carefully, been permitted to set it down for a moment. He's sleeping, he said. Good, she said. Real sleep, he said. I could tell the difference. Yes, she said. It's different. A silence. Brennan spoke to you, he said. Not a question. He did, she said. What did he say? What he believes, she said, which is that I don't have formal standing to be here, and that gratitude doesn't change that. He's technically correct about the standing, Kalen said. He's wrong about the rest. She looked at him. What would you like to do about it? She said. Practically. He looked at her with the gray eyes that were his son's eyes, the focused, reading attention that she was beginning to understand was simply how both of them looked at things that mattered to them. I want to understand how this happened, he said. That illness has been moving through my eastern settlements for 2 months. I had no notification. My formal medical reporting system received nothing, because the people treating it couldn't file to your system without guild registration, she said, which costs money most border healers don't have and requires academy training most border healers haven't done because they were busy treating people. And the guild registration requirement exists. To protect standards, she said, which is a legitimate goal, but the implementation excludes the healers who are actually in the places where illness begins. You get protected standards in the capital and an information blackout in the east. You've thought about this. I've been on the wrong side of it for 4 years. He was quiet. The Academy waiting list, he said slowly, for Omega applicants without PAC sponsorship. 1.5 years, she said. I saved the fees. I applied. I'm still waiting. That's a structural problem, he said. Yes, she said. It is. Brennan manages the Academy appointment process. She looked at him. I know, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Your case records, he said. The 37 cases. Can I see them? She slid the case record book across the table. He opened it. Read. She had been keeping this book for 2 months, and before it, the books that preceded it, every case, every treatment, every outcome, every variation. The documentation of a healer who understood that records were protection, and that her protection came from nowhere else. Kalen read for a long time. She waited. She was good at waiting. This is the most complete field documentation of swamp throat progression I have seen, he said finally, and I have physicians who have been practicing for 30 years. I had 37 cases and nothing else to do, she said. You had 37 cases and you treated them, he said. And you kept the records and you noticed the pattern and you came here when you understood what you were seeing. Anyone would have. No, he said, they wouldn't. Most people would have treated the 37 cases and moved on. You treated them and kept the records and traveled 3 days to get to the capital and spent 2 hours in the courtyard being refused before someone finally let you through. She looked at her hands. The one I lost, she said. On day 9. Her name was Alara. She was 11 years old. He was quiet. I think about her when I'm doing the records, Senna said. I think about whether better documentation would have gotten me to the next case faster, whether I would have had the compound ready sooner. Would it have changed the outcome? I don't know, she said. I keep better records anyway. He looked at her. Senna, he said. Yes, I'm going to ask you to stay. She looked at him steadily. Not as a courtesy guest, he said, formally, as the territory's border medical consultant. It's a position that doesn't currently exist because I haven't needed it, or I haven't understood that I needed it, which is a different problem. Brennan will argue I have no standing. You'll have standing as of tomorrow morning, he said. The formal acknowledgement. It doesn't require guild membership. It requires my signature. The Academy waiting list. I'm reviewing the Academy admission policy, he said. Tonight, because what you just described is a system that excludes the most useful information from the people who most need it, which is not what the system is supposed to do. She looked at him. You're doing this very quickly, she said. My son is alive, he said simply, because you came back 3 times and on the 3rd time someone had the sense to bring you through. I'm not interested in taking a long time to draw conclusions from that. She was quiet for a moment. Brennan is going to manage, he said. He's a good administrator. He manages things. This is the thing I'm giving him to manage. He's going to try to reduce the scope of the position. He can try, Kaylin said. The scope is what I determine. She looked at the case record book. At the record of 37 cases, 1 loss, 36 lives. There are other healers like me, she said, in the border settlements. People who've been practicing without credentials for years, because the credential mechanism excludes them. They have knowledge that isn't in your formal medical registry. I know, he said. I understand that now better than I did this morning. The position should include a mechanism to access that knowledge, not just me, a formal way for border healers to report to the capital system without requiring prior registration. He looked at her steadily. You're designing the position while I'm offering it to you, he said. I've been thinking about what it should look like for 4 years, she said. I had to do something with the waiting. The corner of his mouth moved. It was the first time she had seen that happen. The specific, fractional movement of a man who managed his expressions carefully and had just, briefly, stopped. All right, he said. Tell me what it should look like. Act 5, the morning, and what it held. They talked for 2 hours. Not about the position, specifically about the problem underneath it, the information blackout in the eastern settlements, the credential system's good intentions and structural failures, the knowledge that existed outside the formal registry because the people who held it couldn't access the registry. He listened with the complete, working attention of someone building something in real time. She talked with the specificity of someone who had been thinking about this for 4 years and had finally found a room where the thinking could go somewhere. At some point, the fire burned lower, and Aldrich knocked to ask whether they wanted it rebuilt, and Kaylin said yes without looking up from the case record book he was still reading. When she finished the last point, a proposed reporting mechanism that would allow border healers to submit case notes to the capital's medical registry without prior registration, with formal review to happen after submission rather than before, he was quiet for a long moment. This is a significant policy change, he said. It closes a gap that cost you 6 days, and nearly cost you your son, she said. Yes, he said, it does. He closed the case record book. In the morning, he said, I'm going to ask you to stay while I sign the formal acknowledgement. Not because you need to watch it happen, because I want you to be present when it does, so that everyone who needs to understand what I'm doing understands it clearly. Brennan will be there. Yes, he said, he will. She looked at the fire. Why does it matter that I'm present? Because acknowledgements are administrative, he said. They happen in documents. What I want people to understand is different. I want them to understand that the person in this room tonight is the person who is being acknowledged, not an abstract border healer. You. She looked at him. He was looking at her with the gray eyes that held what she was beginning to think of as his real attention, not the managed, formal, alpha king attention, the actual attention he gave things that mattered. Why does that matter to you? She said. Because you sat in the courtyard for 2 hours being refused and came back, he said. Because you have 37 case records in a book you keep, because records are the only protection you have. Because you lost Alara on day 9, and you still think about her when you're doing the records. She was quiet. Because you treat people no formal system reaches, he said. And you do it precisely because no one gave you a reason to keep doing it. You just kept doing it. She looked at the case record book. I'm not finished, she said quietly. No, he said. You're not. That's what I'm trying not to interrupt. She looked at him. The fire crackled. Outside, the palace was quiet, with the deep quiet of very late night. Somewhere down the corridor, the Alpha King's son was sleeping the real sleep, not the illness sleep, with his fever breaking slowly the way she had said it would. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, he agreed. She picked up her case record book. He's going to be hungry when he wakes, she said. He'll want something sweet. They usually do, after swamp throat. I'll make sure there's something sweet, he said. Not too much, she said. 2 hours of broth first. He'll argue about it. He argues about most things, Kaelin said. He gets that from his mother. She almost said something and then decided not to, because that was private, and she had learned to let private things stay private. Good night, my lord, she said. Good night, Senna, he said. She left. In the morning, Kael woke hungry and asking for honey cakes, which was exactly what she had predicted and which 3 different staff members reported to the Alpha King with the specific relief of people delivering news that they had not expected to be able to deliver. The formal acknowledgement was signed at the first council session. Brennan attended with the composed, managed expression of a man who had assessed the situation and determined that his best position was to manage this outcome rather than contest it. The border medical consultant position was created. The reporting mechanism was drafted. The Academy admission review was opened. Senna was present for all of it. She stood beside the council table, with her satchel over her shoulder, and her case record book under her arm, and her ink-stained hands that she had stopped noticing years ago, and she watched the Alpha King sign documents that were going to change the system she had been navigating from the wrong side of for 4 years. She did not perform gratitude. She watched. She noted what was being created, and what was being left out, and made a mental record of the gaps, because that was what she did. Kaelin caught her eye once during the session across the table, across the document and the quills and the formal apparatus of the thing being made official. She held his gaze. He was doing the real attention. So was she. Any concerns with the current draft? He asked, which was not a question addressed to the council. It was addressed to her. Brennan's jaw was very still. Section 4, she said. The reporting threshold requires 5 cases before a border healer can submit. Swamp throat was identifiable from case 1, if you knew what to look for. The threshold should be 1 case for new pattern alerts. Adjust Section 4, Kaelin said to the scribe, without looking away from her. The scribe adjusted Section 4. Brennan said nothing. The session continued. Senna noted the remaining gaps in her case record book under a new heading she started that morning. Things still to be done. It was, she thought, going to be a long list. She was going to stay until it wasn't. They called her worthless. No credentials. No rank. No pack bond. Just a worn satchel and 10 years of knowledge in a case record book filled with 37 names. She sat in the courtyard for 2 hours being refused. She came back. She came back because a child was dying from something she knew how to treat. That was the whole reason. Not for recognition. Not for reward. Because she could help and the child was dying. And the court froze. Not because of magic. Not because of power. Because they watched someone with nothing walk into a room where everything had failed. And fix it. With knowledge that existed outside every formal system they had built. And the Alpha King, who had been afraid for 6 days, looked at her across the council table, and understood something that would take his territory years to fully implement. That the most useful knowledge is often held by the people you built your systems to exclude, and that the cost of that exclusion had very nearly been everything.